We'd like to welcome everyone to our work session tonight for the Bountiful City Council. And to begin our work session, we will turn the time over to Gary Hill for us to discuss our fiber project.
Thank you, Mayor.
Test.
It's a little
that's
bit
weird. It's a
maybe
green
it's just the
light.
volume.
Oh, volume. Test.
Is
Is it better? Can you hear?
Do I have the power?
Still trying. Keep
You
going.
can tell. Yeah.
It's very quiet back there.
Does it doesn't sound like the microphone. It's okay. Okay. So speak into the mic and speak loudly, I guess. Okay. We'll turn the time over to Gary Hill.
Okay. Hopefully the audience at home can hear us too. Appreciate the opportunity, Council. We have two items on the work session tonight. The first is we want to take about 20 minutes or so and give you an update on fiber and the installation and be available to answer questions about installation. The very interesting thing about what we are doing is we're used as a city to having construction projects, and we're used to the mess and the hand-holding that we do as we disrupt people's lives temporarily on whether that's a street reconstruction or a water line project. But a project like this is unique, where you do that in one neighborhood, and then you go to the next, and then you go to the next, and over the course of 2 to 3 years, you are doing it everywhere in town. And so it's quite a process, and I have to say that we're very, very pleased with how the project is going so far. I wanted to give you a couple of stats that might be interesting to kind of tell you how we're doing. First, I'm going to show you up on the screen some pictures. So currently, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 footprints that are under construction, or 5 areas of town that are under construction, 3 more that are released for construction. The first footprint, I believe I have these in the correct order. The first footprint that was released was footprint 3, which is down west of Viewmont High School in the northwest part of town. Footprint 2 added a little bit more to that. And then footprint 4 is as we head up 4th North and around, and then look at this one. This is the fun one. These are footprints 1, 5, and 6, part of which is under construction and part of which has been released for construction. But you can see that I'm going to click that on and off again just because that's fun. But if you thought we were doing a lot of work before, this is what's in process right now. And I'm not sure how many crews that we have in town right now. I'm guessing it's around 12. And so there's a lot of dirt flying, but we've been really pleased with the progress that we're making. Some of those stats that I mentioned to date, installed by B. Jackson and Utopia, we have 58 miles, more than 58 miles of conduit, more than 20 miles of fiber in that conduit, and over 2,200 handholds have been dug. So that's a lot. Just in January, 56,000 feet of conduit were laid. That's the highest production that we've had, but not by much. In December, they installed 50,000 feet of conduit, and the next highest after that, or before that, was back in September. So the weather has been helpful to a degree, certainly, but the crews have been outstanding. I last Friday, as I was coming down the hill, at one point I looked at some holes that were being dug at the top of Center Street just before Rocket Park, and I feel bad, but we knew that was going to happen in this part of town. It's all boulders about the size of my head or bigger. It was very little dirt, mostly rocks. just an amazing amount of work that goes into some of this area. I want to show you also a plan sheet that gets submitted by B. Jackson and Utopia and has to be approved by the engineering department to give you an idea of the kinds of other utilities that we're dealing with. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit on a section of this. Let's see. Let's go to. So that might give a little bit of a better idea. But you can see this is the plan sheet that has all of the other utilities. And starting in the middle of the road, you have water lines, we have sanitary sewer, we have electrical, that's red. Orange is other telecommunication facilities. And you can see that nearly everything is congregated in the park strip. The bounds of the public utility easement are this black line over here and this black line over here. But nearly everything is already congregated in the park strips. And so as these guys are looking at where to install the fiber, it's kind of a challenge because of the amount of utilities that are already within that public right-of-way. And in the least expensive and perhaps most important, the easiest area to repair anything that's under a sidewalk or under the road is particularly challenging to fix and expensive and difficult to install, which is why those park strips are so useful for some of this infrastructure. I want to draw your attention to the preferred construction method that is outlined on each one of their plan sheets over here on the bottom right-hand side. But the order of preference that we require of the contractor is first back of curb, so in the park strip, second back of the sidewalk within the utility easement, and then if necessary beneath the sidewalk. Of course, that's quite challenging because any infrastructure that goes under the sidewalk requires frequently replacement of pieces of sidewalk. We know how we're going to look at a concrete contract later tonight. So you know how expensive concrete is. But it's also challenging because those flower pots or the boxes also then have to be installed in the sidewalk. And so and you can't install those in the road. So that's why quite a bit of the work has to be done in what people see as their front yards, but still within the public utility easement. On top of that, the optimal location, and you guys hopefully will correct anything that I'm saying wrong, but some of the optimal location is on property borders so that you're not putting necessarily a box in every yard. You're going to put it near a property line. But that's the same thing as any other utility. They're also going to want to have those near a property line. And so it gets crowded within the park strip and near property lines. And so in order to be able to put this stuff in, sometimes our guys have to be creative when they get on site. And that says nothing about the actual site conditions like the boulders that you find around Rocket Park or Hannah Holbrook and other challenging locations. But with that, I thought I might let Utopia and B. Jackson kind of introduce themselves a little bit. I think you know Roger Timmerman and Nicole Cottle here from Utopia, but a name that you're probably very familiar with is Clayton Savage. Clayton is the guy who is listed on all of the flyers that get hung on people's doors. This is Clayton on the front row. He's the man. I told him we really appreciate the work that he does, but want to turn the time over to and I apologize, Dalton Jackson for a minute to talk about what B. Jackson has been doing for us. And then, Dalton, maybe if you don't mind, maybe you could explain a little bit in a little bit more detail the process that you go through as you get on site and find some of these challenging site conditions and how you work with neighbors.
And you've done a great job presenting it. The biggest challenge is they do the best they can going off that GIS information and the previous utility information, but once it gets located, that's when they really know. So we have to kind of go based off, a lot of people are like, what determines park strip or PUD? A lot of times it's, if there's existing utilities in the park strip, and there's nothing in the PUD, we typically move it there. trying to make it better for the public, right? So you don't want to be potholing a lot extra than you have to. You want to be minimizing that. You want your cleanup to be very spotless as you get it in and out of areas. Clayton does a great job, but our thing is if there's a complaint, we take care of it within 24 hours. Just there's no ifs, ands, or buts. We take care of it that day. Obviously, if it's hard surface, that might get pushed out a little bit, but we'll communicate that with the homeowner because sometimes you can't get concrete for 2 days, so we temp it. So, but yeah, once we get these plans, we'll call in blue stakes. We hang door hangers with Clayton's information, so the homeowner knows who to contact. We'll white line it, so USIC, ELM, even Bountiful locators will know where our running line is. Once it's marked, if we have to change the running line, we'll make those adjustments, and typically we'll get with Reed and let him know, hey, this in the park strip won't work. We got to run it 1 foot back a walk in PV. So we make those adjustments as we need to, but honestly, overall, this has been a great build, and it's moving at a great pace. The citizens have been good. We've had limited complaints, and you know, we'd be lying if we said we're going to go through a city and not have any complaints, right? We're always going to have complaints, but our biggest thing is it gets taken care of within 24 hours. So, I mean, is there anything you want me to elaborate on or go into?
Why don't we see if the council has any questions, if that's okay, council?
I appreciate that because that's the reality, right? We know that we're not going to disrupt the ground in this way and have no problems, no complaints. But if we can reassure our residents by saying, you will be responsive, and you've demonstrated that. So we really appreciate that. Council, any other questions you have?
I do have one, if I could, Mayor. The lines as laid, how are those being uploaded to our GIS system so we'll know in the future?
So what we do, and then I'll let Utopia kind of go into how they upload it to their system. But as we build it, we do as-built and red lines. So if it's like goes 1 foot back a walk, we'll actually mark that down, even if the print says park strip. So we'll make those adjustments on our red lines, our production sheets, and then we'll send it over to Utopia to where they make the adjustments on their GIS. And then I'll let Roger kind of go into that.
Super.
So, I mean, we have, like, I guess you call it maybe the master GIS database for the fiber and conduit boxes and all of our networks. That's constantly being updated with as-built from construction contractors. It starts as the engineering drawings, things get modified, inspected, and adjusted and updated. And then there's repair work and relocation work and stuff that is just gonna happen perpetually. But as we're completing bills specifically the Bountiful City, we're submitting those, and with the bills that we get reimbursed for, you're getting the actual exports out of our database that can be imported into your GIS system. I can talk closer to that probably. So you guys are getting that updated occasionally as we're basically saying these are completed areas. As far as like live access to that, I think we have that ability, but for now, it's during the build, it's a little less important. It's just, hey, this area's been completed, and here's the maps. And you guys, I'm assuming you guys have your own GIS system that's being imported into. That's happening regularly.
Thanks. Your folks were in our neighborhood last week and this week, and the first night that they came through on Center Street between 1st and 2nd West, I got a call from 2 different neighbors who were concerned about the fact that they had just put in plants in the park strip, et cetera, et cetera. And so I went and drove by. It was dark by the time they had called me. I went and drove by, and there were still piles of dirt and on tarps, and I could tell that the work was not even close to being done yet. Anyway, I called them after the next day when everything looked like it was back to normal and that street was completed, and they were really happy with how things were put back together. So it is a little disruptive, but the crews that are doing our area are just awesome. They really are.
We've worked with a lot of contractors over the years, and you really do have the very best here with B. Jackson. They're good, they're responsive, the quality is excellent, and we're happy to have them in here with this project.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just like to add a little bit to this. So
Dalton, sorry. Do you mind speaking right into that? Eat that microphone. Sorry. Thanks.
So we do have wetter days, just know, we do our best to try to compact missile pits and everything the best we can, but we know it's hard to compact clay when it's wet. So when the snow melts out, the weather warms up a little bit, we'll drive through every job site area and we'll make sure it gets, if we have to rip out the sod, recompact it, bring in new sod, that's what we'll do. So make sure citizens know if they do come up and talk to you, that's what we do. We'll go back through and make sure it's all taken care of, so.
In the spring, when our secondary water and all that gets pressurized in that, and people see issues of sprinklers, is it the same process that we're doing now, is just contact you if they suspect that it was because of the conduit?
Correct. And what we do too is we'll get with your water department or secondary, whoever is over that, and we'll say, hey, what's your hard date on turning this on? And we'll actually have crews on standby. So if homeowners do call in, we're right there to fix it.
Awesome.
And yeah, and if something gets missed, right, someone doesn't call in and it's 2-3 days later and they suspect it was us, we'll go fix it.
Okay.
So,
Mayor, I have another question.
yeah.
I think the My Bountiful Fiber website that, is kind of a shared effort between the city and Utopia has been a wealth of information and very handy. I'm glad that, Clayton, your information's on there. I've handed it out freely. And the FAQs have been really great. There's one FAQ I'd love for us to add, and it is something along the lines of this graph this map that you have showing, Gary. I think when residents are expecting and prepared for the park strip, very prepared for that. And then when it comes into the back of sidewalk into the front yard, that's when the residents kind of have this moment of panic. And for the most part, you're able to talk residents through that, and they're able to see, thankfully, on other streets, now that we have several example streets, since you're almost halfway across the city, they're able to see that. But that initial moment of panic really freaks people out when it's in the front yards. And so I think if we had, in one of the graphics that we're showing in the FAQ, something that we can easily point to and say, this is the reason why, here are the other utilities that they're competing with, why it's important to be 3 feet away from gas and give the electrical line space, all of those things would be really helpful, so that when they have that initial panic, that it's not just the park strip that they had been expecting, but coming in a little bit, that there's an easy FAQ to point to with pictures.
And just to add to that, if we're going to do, because there's 2 examples I think that's unique to Bountiful, is a neighborhood without a sidewalk, and then the neighborhoods with the sidewalk. And in my last neighborhood I lived in, on 1130 North, that's a neighborhood that doesn't have a sidewalk. And I drove through that after a few phone calls from old neighbors, and went by the week that they called me and saw the mess, and then I went back the next week and everything was cleaned up. But I was really surprised at how nice it looked in those neighborhoods that don't have a sidewalk, that doesn't have the easement and that parking strip. So I think if we did that with the 2 different examples, that might help the different residents that have that.
Perfect.
I have a question. So when a complaint, I believe the complaints are being addressed quickly. And so my comment or question is not that I don't think that's happening, but is it being logged or reported somewhere? This person had a complaint. This is the issue. We showed up. We took care of it in this way. We talked to so-and-so. Is there any kind of recording at all of how that?
We kind of log it in, honestly, through like email on our end of things, but typically, I mean, not trying to sound cocky or anything, when we take care of it, it's done, typically, right? And if we get another response, we make sure at that point it is taken care of. So we'll do it on an email side of things, being like, hey, did this for sure get taken care of? Yes, it did, that day. So we don't necessarily track it because we've never really had to. It's just more of an email base. So.
And email is all internal, I assume? Like
Yeah.
if someone calls in,
Correct.
you're sending an email from one employee to another employee.
Yeah, it'll typically be Darren Woolley. He's the PM over all telecom, and it'll typically go to Clayton, and he'll handle it. So.
Let me just
add a little
Yeah.
to that. So Utopia in that situation is a little bit of a second option or a catch-all in the sense, if it isn't taken care of by them, then they can call us. Or if it's a bigger damage or something like that, sometimes those will come to us. Because that question came up when we were looking at it like, well, do we have a comprehensive list or log of all the incidents? No, we don't, because most of them never get to us. They go straight to B. Jackson and they resolve them. We do log the ones that go to us, and we have a CRM system that tracks each call and whatever. But it's not an accurate reflection of how many incidents there's been, but it gives us a sense. I mean, we can compare it, like, is this relatively similar to other projects? You know, that was a question that came up, and it's like, yeah, it's right in line with what we see in others, meaning there are a decent amount of complaints, but they also get resolved. You know, we haven't had, as far as I know, any gas strikes or you know, sinkholes or anything like that. You know, those things can happen in a large construction project. You know, knock on wood, though, we got a lot to build still, and the crews are excellent. But there's still going to be a lot of complaints, right? We are going to break sprinkler lines, we're going to cause damage, there's going to be people just concerned with people in their yard, right? But what we will do is be responsive, we'll clean it up, and really, when this project is done, it will look like we weren't there, other than that there's boxes in the ground ready to connect people to the fiber service. So the restoration is fantastic, and you answered a lot of the questions already as far as like, what are the response times? It's usually very, very fast. Sometimes there's a little bit of a lead if there's concrete or other things like that, but you know, I wish we could show people, this is what it's gonna look like when we're done. Well, what that looks like is what it looks like right now before they do the work, and it's hard to believe when you see the amount of digging and holes and, you know, piles of dirt on tarps and all the other stuff. They're like, this looks bad, but they do a great job of cleaning it up. The utilities that get located, you know, they spray paint, right? It's not the prettiest thing in the world when you have all these different colors of lines marked all over people's yards. That paint fades. I mean, it's a specific kind of paint that does fade. So you know, it's like if you fast forward a year, it looks great. But there is a period of time when it is pretty intrusive to residents.
I have maybe kind of a follow-up, somewhat related, maybe it's not. What's the typical process of communicating with the neighborhood as far as when you go in, and it sounds like there's door hangers and all of that, but help us understand,
show
and
and
those that
tell.
are listening, what that process looks like and what they should expect.
So we have different ways to notify people. We don't have their contact information. So the best way we found is to put these door hangers. Now we have different ones. We're like, here's our Bountiful Fiber crews will be in your area in the next few days to begin construction. And that'll have contact information. This one doesn't, but it has Clayton. I was like, Dalton, not Dalton. Don't call Dalton. Call Clayton. It has his information on them. And if there's ever a problem, they all have the main phone number and email on here as well. But it's a little quicker resolution to use Clayton's information. We have this one that's like, hey, our technicians were unable to reach you. If there's some reason we needed to, excuse me, access their property or something with their permission, if we're in the back of the yard or something like that. We have, what's this other one? This was working in your yard today to install conduit, just to kind of let them know that we were there. So they can see, oh, hey, what happened to my yard? There's a hole or something. So when they're there, there's a notification. And also, I think there's a little note here, like additional watering may be needed for your grass. You know, there'll be sod replacement. This is a hard time of year because, you know, if they kill some grass or replace it and put sod there, it's not going to root or whatever, or take, I don't know what the right terms are, retake very well. So some of that will die, some of it will just take a long time, and that can be redone later. It works much better in the spring and summer, but you know, they do what they can do during the winter, but it all cleans up much better in the summer.
Thanks. What other questions?
I have a question for you, Roger.
Yep.
The other thing that I have found very handy, because we have a lot of excited residents, is the build-out timelines on the My Bountiful Fiber website. It sounds like, based on the maps and the report, that you're ahead of schedule, and we have more crews working than we anticipated when these timelines were built. Do you anticipate that you can, at any point, upgrade these timelines based on where you think you are now, based on the crews you've been able to dedicate and the for the different
Yeah,
footprints?
if we get far enough ahead of schedule, then we can pull those in a little bit. At this point, we're like, so we talk about it regularly, like, are we ready to pull those in? I mean, we're still in the winter season. We could get slammed. You know, we've had some of our worst winter storms hit late February and things before. So yes, it's going well, but I think at the end of the winter season is probably when we can know what can be done over the next summer before the next winter season hits, and we'll have some greater accuracy we could apply to those and potentially pull some dates in. But as of today, we're not
You're not
really
quite ready
wanting
to
to
do
pull
that?
those in. We got to see how the rest of the winter plays out.
Okay, well, if we had a tracker on just that page of that website, I think it would get a lot of traffic where people are excited and they're checking. And, you know, if you're in zone 10, it's not as exciting as if you're in, you know, zone 3.
The thing is, I mean, I've seen a lot of comments online of like, you know, oh man, it's not going to be to my house for another 2 years or something. I do honestly believe we'll be well ahead of schedule for completion of this system. If you remember the original agreement, it's like we've got 3 years contractually, but we really think we'll be wrapped up in about 2. And that's all subject to things going well. Even if we wrapped up in 2.5, that'd still be pretty good. But we're trending towards 2 years. So we're working hard. I think the pace of construction's actually ramping up a little bit. So I don't know if that's accurate. I think.
I'd like to add to that, like a little bit here too. I mean, we're ramping up as much as we can, but just know we're at the mercy of blue stakes. So as fast as ELM or USIC can mark, that's as fast as we can go. So just kind of understand that as well. Like we'll add crews as they mark. So the faster they mark for us, faster we can go. So, and that'll accelerate your timeline on there as well, so.
I've got a question. With the parcels that have been released, the FP3, 2, and 4, and am I right? And that was FP3, 2, and 4, and those are available for people to sign up right now. People can.
There's like 500 addresses that can sign up and be installed right now, and that's just in one of the footprints.
Is that 3?
Footprint 3.
Yeah, and it's not all of 3, but it's most of 3.
Okay. So just a quick question about that. Okay, 2, 3, and 4 are completed though.
No,
So-
they're under construction.
Okay.
Their footprint 3 is only 78% complete. Footprint 2 is 66% complete. Footprint 4 is 56% complete, and then 1 and 5 are about 35% complete. Now that's design and construction.
Okay. So with regard to just that portion of footprint 3 that is released and people can sign up, do we have how is that then being communicated? Because that's going to come on really quick, I assume, as these footprints are completed in the spring and summer. Is that another door hanger? How is that being communicated to those residents?
So we do post on the social media accounts. So the Bountiful Fiber thing will say, hey, here's a new part of the city where it's available. So if people are following us online, that's like an immediate, like day of type of way to find out. We also send flyers to those addresses. Those can take a few days to get processed and delivered. We release those addresses to our service providers, so they become aware that those are available. So their marketing from a whole bunch of different companies starts hitting those addresses. So they usually get a little bit bombarded immediately because those providers are kind of racing a little bit to get an order before someone else does. But those are the most effective methods and what we've been doing. I mean, there's other ways. They can call us. They can pre-sign up, and our people will reach out when that becomes available to schedule an installation and capture their final order. I think that's about it. But
So the flyer that comes in the mail, is that from Utopia? And is that coming in
it'll be
traditional
branded as
mail?
Bountiful Fiber.
Uh-huh.
So there'll be the ones that we produce that are service provider neutral, but then this providers are free to do their own marketing.
Galen, you had this happen recently in Syracuse, where you live. How many flyers that fiber was available through Utopia would you say you got at your house?
I probably, and Syracuse's installation might be a little bit different. I think it's the same offerings, but I probably had 5 or 6 that came over the time that, I knew that's when it was available. I did have the door hanger originally that had Clayton's name and so forth on it. And they just came pretty rapidly, and it was just a good reminder of, hey, it's available. I can get out there and sign up.
Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions that we have?
Just a comment that when we get to that point where we're actively trying to take subscribers, I hope that we can track that really carefully of how many homes it's available to and how many homes are actually taking it so that we can track our take rate accordingly. Thanks.
Yeah, we have that. In fact, it's in your weekly, in your monthly.
I was looking at it, but
yeah.
I just don't know what that relates to in the big picture.
Okay.
We'd received some questions from you before the meeting. You want me to go through those, or are we good?
I think we're okay.
Yeah, I think really the questions have been answered. So any other last things that the council needed to know? It's really useful information. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it.
Okay, and we're always available. As questions come up, feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Love this project, love the city, and it's all going well from our perspective. So
Great. We're hearing good things, and we really appreciate your work. So thank you very much. And we understand if you have to go. You're welcome to stay, but we understand if you have to go. So thank you. We will we'll pick it up where we left off with the general plan land use discussion. We'll turn the time over to Mr. Francisco Astorga.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We had that last discussion took place back on January 23rd, where the City Council, through that work session, we looked at the land use element. We started doing that, and we got through 2 sections. We got through parks, open space, and civic, as well as the foothill residentials. And not some of the comments, but the comments that were provided to us, we already edited them and placed them on the packet as indicated on page 12 and also on page 13. The open space section had a comment regarding having a robust community involvement whenever we design or whenever we work or develop a city park or a city facility. We added that language. And then what I recall was on page 13, the foothill residential, we wanted to include the International Wildland Urban Interface restrictions that are in place. Even though this is not an implementation plan, at least it's a good reminder that this area qualifies as such. And also, we added the ADU component. And I just simply, regarding that, I just simply wanted to say that when the first state ADU change came through, the state allowed us to carve sections, a certain percentage of our city, basically a portion that's single-family dwelling. They gave us the option to prohibit ADUs. And not we, but the city council decided not to do that. So just a quick reminder, ADUs are currently permitted throughout the entire city. The internal, what we call the internal, or the attached ADU, it's via a permitted use that they have to apply for. And then the detached ADUs are simply through that conditional use permit, which is the old process that we continue to follow. Perhaps Council Member Murray could benefit from this knowledge as he wasn't around, but I think he was paying attention to that back in the day. So we felt that it was important to, and that's why I brought it up 2 weeks ago on the 23rd, that the foothill does include some ADUs. So moving on to the discussion that we had, we were asked to provide an analysis regarding specific language of how, not language, but a better understanding of how scale, mass, architectural language in relationship to duplexes, townhouses, cottage courts, triplexes, fourplexes, and how these possible future land use can be accommodated throughout our residential stock, which most of it is single-family residential. So we appreciate the photographs that were sent by Councilmember Bell. We did send an email, and we appreciate his pictures, and we're going to go through those in just a minute. Before we do so, moving on to the first exhibit here, we just want to briefly go over, as we had a question by council regarding design elements. Design elements. And this is outlined in state code of what we can and cannot do, and we did place a copy of that here in your staff report. I believe we're on page 15. That tells us what we can or cannot do. The state moves forward and defines. I think they have A through L on what they, of how we define a building design element, and that's what these two are. And I don't want to do a reread it. It's all in your packet, and I can come back to it if necessary. And then the state code somewhat written backwards. First, it tells us what that design element is. Then it tells us that we may not impose a requirement for a building design element on one or two family dwellings. And then it tells you, except for in these specific areas. Moving forward.
Francisco, before you move off, can you?
Yeah, and this is the quick summary right here, in that we can impose, should we choose to implement in the future design elements for 3 or more dwelling units of any sort. There aren't any restrictions regarding commercial development either. And then going back to the second part, in some areas and cases, we can regulate for 1 or 2 family dwellings. It's the exception of the exception. And I can go back, Councilwoman Bradshaw, if necessary.
So, element E, zones primarily for residential use pre-1950.
Yeah.
Can you go into how that applies to our city?
Yeah, we'll go back and we'll actually take a look at the text. This is the text copied word for word. Hold on. No, that's just my summary. I'm going to go back to page 15, if we don't mind.
Yeah, so you've got elements A through L that are building design elements that you cannot restrict in 1 and 2 family dwellings. And then, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have any designated historic districts. We may have flood zones. We do have some wildland urban interface, but the bulk of our city, well, not the bulk, a chunk of our city would be pre-1950s. So I was curious what areas that would apply to.
Yeah, it would be, I think it would be what I call older Bountiful. Plat A, and also development between Orchard down to 500 West. I mean, the county does a pretty good job keeping the original building date. They do that through their database. And what the text actually says, and I have that in front of me, we're on page 15. You got to read section 3, which indicates section 2 does not apply to, and then we'll go to E, a dwelling located within an area that is zoned primarily for residential use. Most of these areas would check that first box. And then Roman numeral 2, was substantially developed before calendar year 1950. How we would define substantially developed, we would, that right there would be the challenge. So that's just, I guess, the intro, or that's what state code indicates regarding this. Does that help?
That is really tricky stuff.
It is.
Yeah. Sorry. when I hear you talking about this, I'm like, that is tricky, especially in these older historic areas where there's quite a bit that was developed pre-1950, and then there's been significant development after that.
If I may add a further commentary, before I came into the city in 2019, there was a different way that we submitted that moderate income housing report. It was every other year. And one of the strategies, completely different from what we do nowadays, as it wasn't part of the general plan, but the city recognized a high percentage of stock, and I don't have that number, that was built prior to 1950s. Furthermore, the zoning code allows some further exceptions to houses that were built pre-1950 in how they're able to expand. Instead of putting them, as far as we're concerned, they don't meet the parking, in that you're supposed to have 4 parking spaces for a single-family dwelling, 2 of which are required to be in a garage. That's what my current code indicates. If any of those had a remodel, I would say, oh, I can't help you. We've got a business as usual would be, I can't help you. You're increasing the level of nonconformance by your house getting bigger, X, Y, and Z. But the city, and I haven't taken that deep dive, chose to provide some flexibility to those pre-1950 structures so they can expand, so we don't go into a legal nonconforming realm, as it's very not tedious, but it's more of a complicated process on what they can or cannot do, and I believe that was done in an effort to maintain the correlation between the smaller that a unit is, and that's how development pattern was pre-1950, the more affordable it tends to be. So the code did provide some additional flexibility for 1950 pre-development. And that's just the efforts that the city, that we've done in the past, and I believe it was in an effort to maintain more of that housing affordability throughout the city.
So just to clarify, we do have a little more liberty when it comes to 3 or more family dwellings. So we can hold them to certain standards. For example, if we're wanting the look and feel of a single family home, then we can impose some of those kind of standards for those kind of buildings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No state restrictions for 3 or more units.
So that would include triplexes,
Correct.
fourplexes.
Absolutely.
Okay, and beyond. I have another clarifying question about the code. On 2H, 2H, little double I, the increase in density for, as a exchange for having design elements imposed, and then it says, or another benefit not otherwise available. I'm just wondering, just from the planning department's perspective and what has been happening, can you give us some example if A, this has happened, and B, what are some of the other benefits that we should be aware of?
Sure.
What's common, what's been permitted, what does that look like?
Sure. The first part of your question, I'm going to be general, as I wasn't ready to answer that question. But through a PUD, the city in the past has allowed flexibility to the developer in either placing higher densities throughout the city. I don't believe that we've gone to the extent of, while doing that, requiring for any of these building design elements, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Of the ones I have received the additional densities or flexibility in the code through a planned unit development, I don't believe that we have gone to that design element feature. That's how I'll keep the first answer. The second answer is that it is a great tool for a developer to get a higher quality product if we have specifics in our code that says, if you'd like to get this, then you have to provide that. We call that the gives and gets analysis in a way, in that our code was extremely vague and simply said that we can or we could entertain a PUD to simply provide flexibility. It didn't define what that flexibility was. So based on that, a few years ago, I want to say maybe 3, maybe 4 years ago, we amended the definition, obviously through the legislative process, so we wouldn't necessarily give away the farm, as it was a too open-ended definition of a PUD. Provide the developer flexibility without any set controls or parameters. So I would say that it's a great tool if you have that ceiling or that floor. If you have that arrangement already set, which doesn't have to be exact, but it says, well, we're comfortable with this much more density, and we need to get these amenities, density bonuses, open space requirements, saving cultural assets. If you have set parameters, it can become a great tool for the city, instead of making it up as you're entertaining that specific application in time. Does that make sense?
So I just want to be clear. Are you indicating that, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that this is a powerful tool and could help maybe even with our moderate income housing goals. But we have not heretofore required this additional density, or we have given additional density. Sorry, that is actually what I meant to say. We have granted additional density without requiring design elements or additional amenities or features. Have we?
To the best of my knowledge, we haven't.
We have not.
But I have not taken that deep dive to verify exactly that. As far as I know, we haven't gotten to that extent.
This seems like something that we would want to be very intentional about in the future, about exactly what kind of, like you said, the give and get, like what we're going to want to be giving and getting in the future. If we're giving the additional density, what that's going to mean we're getting in return as far as community design standards, et cetera. Or those, like you mentioned, open space or amenities.
Right.
How, I'm just kind of wondering, this seems like the time to be discussing, not in this meeting, but during this general plan process, it seems like this is the time that we should be discussing those things. What that would look like, how many units per size of development, et cetera. Is that best practices, or what? I'm sure there are best practices in, or planning. I would hate for this whole process to kind of come and go, and this is like a tool, like you said, and a powerful tool. And one of the things that we've identified so many times in visioning is we want to preserve the look and feel and the kind of, I don't know how to say it better than that right now, of Bountiful. So I hope that we'll see this again before we finalize our general plan update, is all I'm saying.
Maybe I could comment. I think that is a step, but I think it comes 3 or 4 steps down the road.
Right.
I think the level that we're at now, and the question I think we're trying to determine is, do you want to see multiple unit housing in any of these single-family zones? If the answer is yes, but with restrictions, then we go down the path of identifying what those tools or restrictions are, like a PUD or by developer agreement. Or yes, we're willing, but only with certain design standards or size restrictions. So that would come later. I think the first question really is there an appetite at all to, knowing that we have limitations on duplexes, for example, is there an appetite at all in these single-family zones or can't remember what we're calling the term of art now.
Yeah, I think we're just calling it
Place
single family.
types.
And Mr. Hill, you're absolutely right, and I think you've inadvertently that's the segue to the exercise that we'd like to have with council. We have 5 minutes left. I repeated some of these photographs from the packet, but we added a few more. And is it okay if I move on to the next
Yeah,
portion?
please.
Can I quickly just ask, you can answer this quickly, but on that last slide you were just on, that second piece, the bottom, it says in some areas or cases, can you say what that might mean?
Yeah,
That apply to us?
it would be if the neighborhood were substantially developed in the pre-1950s, if we have a development agreement, if the it goes back
to that. It's that list.
It's A through H.
Got it, okay. Thanks, please.
I'll go through this one quickly. I did not produce this exhibit. This was done by Opticos. It was Daniel Paralek, the author, the architect who coined the term missing middle, or missing middle. And this one also ended up on your staff report in that this is the principle, the one on the top, distributed throughout a block, is as you can see, the more yellow types of structures is what it's the request, I guess I would say, or what most people are indicating through the outreaching efforts that the city had, through the steering committee, through many efforts that we had, and through this movement. And by the way, it is what you say, the missing middle. It's what the whole state is focused on, and to be quite honest, it's not just Utah. Many other cities are trying to incorporate these housing types. So moving on, I don't want to spend too much time on this one, as this made it to your packet. But this is what I wanted to do. Would this housing type, as we go through this, would this housing type fit in the single-family residential neighborhood? Pay attention to the height, number of stories, width, massing, density. What works, what doesn't work, where's the parking located? I don't want to spend too much time on ADUs. They're great. Real quick, this one barely meets the code. I think that we need to further tweak it, as it just barely meets it, yet it meets it. That's where it's located. This duplex, this is a Bountiful duplex located in the Orchard Drive neighborhood. Pretty big, 2,700 square feet. It's zone MXDR. That's the only reason why it was built. Does it work? Would you mind having this next to you? What's good and what's bad? This is a duplex. This was built as a PUD. This one is on 200 West. Quite big, 3,732. Zone RM13. So this would not be allowed in the single-family residential zone. Another Bountiful duplex, pretty big. None of these, we counted the garages, but it gives you an idea. This is on by the temple. Does it work? Does it not work? I need some water. More of a modest type of duplex. Again, this one's on Mill Street. There's a one story. This is not allowed throughout the city. A brand new development as this type is simply not allowed. There's another duplex. This one's huge. This is the famous triplex on First West. It's in the downtown area. It's got 3 doors. They're all 2-bedroom units. It's not a townhouse. It's built like Legos, where one is a 2 of them are 2 stories, and one of them is a 1-story apartment, pretty much. The parking's in the back. Here's another triplex over at Orchard area. I don't want you to look, if you're familiar with this, you shouldn't say, we're not looking at the development. We're not talking about the 8 triplex that are there. We're talking about this triplex. Could this fit next to a single-family dwelling or one of these in a single-family dwelling neighborhood. This one's on Main Street. Again, not in the R district. These are townhouses, by the way, about 2,000 square feet. I'm almost out of time. Would this fit next to you?
And are we assuming that all the setbacks and parking requirements would be the same, or that would require additional modifications to the code on setbacks and parking?
Right. So as right now, we're only focusing on the typology. Opticos and some of these architectural firms that do create and consult by providing pattern books and whatnot, they do come up with a recommended square footage area. It's quite dense when you look at those. And that's the part of the general plan is that we need to decide, we don't need to go down that route. Whatever works for Norfolk, Virginia, or Kirkland, Washington, it's not necessarily what's going to work out for Bountiful. So we're not necessarily looking at tonight at the minimum lot size, but we're looking at the scale and the mass of each of these dwellings. This is R4. This is on Main Street. It's a fourplex. We didn't have the exact numbers of every apartment. Would you mind, if I could point out, it's got side access and all the parking's in the back. I was there, I believe it has 8 parking spaces, 4 covered and 4 uncovered. And then this is the townhouses on 2nd West. Does it work? How about a triplex? Would this work? How about a duplex? Would that work next to a single family dwelling? They're about 1,500 square foot each, and the parking it doesn't show it on the picture, but it's over here on the side. I think, again, 8 parking spaces. And then towards the end, we talk about what cottage courts. Nope, we don't have any in Bountiful. It was a recommendation by the consultant. This next exhibit tells us a little bit what they are. It could be something as this. I think this one is 11. Just to give you this example, this is from Norfolk, Virginia. All these are not necessarily the same area, but if they've got covered parking, 11 units, 1 common building, and usually there's some grassy or common space. All of these are, as you can see on the photographs here, they're all single-family dwellings. Would this work out? Obviously, we would have to have a minimum lot size for these. Could this work in Bountiful? I wanted to put this one in that, the text didn't show up. Quick example. I don't believe this one works. This one is much different than all the other ones. It's got a flat roof and it's 3 stories. This was one that was submitted by the people we surveyed and said, we love this project. And we say that this one fits great downtown, fits great closer to 5th West. We don't believe that this one, at least from staff, this one would fit in the single family. And we got a lot of good comments on this one. This one's in North Salt Lake. This is a 6 or 7-plex. It doesn't work. So the key takeaways that we found, and that's not in the presentation, but that's in the staff report, simply we believe that the massing may work, as the massing is a function of the width and the height, and that the gross assumption for height throughout Bountiful for a single-family dwelling is it's about 1.5 to 2 stories. We believe that if we can mitigate that, the function of the mass gets a little complicated. It is all over the place, so it's a little bit more difficult for us to say this is the average for Bountiful City. But at the same time, we did find these good examples throughout the city in that we believe that it could work if we put some parameters. So I am completely out of time.
Yeah, we're up against the end of our time, so I'm really sorry you got shortchanged tonight, but I really appreciate you beginning this discussion. We will be continuing this discussion, and you gave us some great things to think about. So
Mr. Hill, I think we could ask the mayor to give council some homework to study these, to think what works, and then we'll come back in 2 weeks. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, I think our general idea, strategy would be starting with this next week when we'll have a full hour is to find out, start probing the question, council, do you think some, any, none of these would work in our single-family zones? And if you think they could, under what circumstances? That's kind of the work we have in front of us.
That's great. That helps really clarify. Thank
Mayor,
you.
could we ask for further, just some additional information from the planning department? Because on page 9, 5, and then on page 14, where it defines the townhouse, cottage courts, triplex, and fourplexes, limited to areas with direct access to major roadways. Is that currently defined, major roadways? And would that, I mean, I would personally just like to know in my homework what I'm considering as far as what are we calling the major roadways. I mean, I think we could start throwing things around, but is that something we're going to define in the product? Because I would.
That's a question, if you don't mind coming back with that. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
We'll have
Thank
that
you.
answer.
Okay. All right. Well, we will just take a very brief 1-minute break, and we'll come right back with our regular council meeting.